Welcome to week 4 of Spectacular Specimens. I'm Dr. Katherine O'Brien from the Museum of Biological Diversity. Each week we team up with the librarians from the Grandview Heights Public Library to pair specimens from our collection with books from the library. To download the books from the library, follow the links below the description of this video. This week we're going to be talking about the animals that you can find in Ohio's rivers and streams. Get ready, let's go fishing.
Hello, my name is Mael Glon and I'm a PhD student at the Ohio State University Museum of Biological Diversity studying crayfish. Most of you have likely seen or caught a crayfish before, sometimes called crawfish or crawdads. These lobster-like crustaceans are frequently found scurrying along creek or lake bottoms searching for food. Speaking of food, many of you have probably even eaten crayfish, particularly if you've traveled to Louisiana and attended a crawfish boil. What a lot of people don't realize, however, is that crayfish are very diverse and important. In the United States alone, there are nearly 400 crayfish species. That's more than half of all the crayfish species in the world. Even more impressive than this number of species is how diverse these crayfish are in terms of size, color, and habitat preference. The smallest crayfish in the United States barely reach an inch in length, while the biggest are as big as small lobsters, and there are species everywhere in between. Most people think of crayfish as being gray or brown, but crayfish come in all colors and patterns. Some species are bright blue, orange, or even rainbow colored. Others have brightly colored stripes or highlights all over their body, and others yet are mottled like granite to help them blend in better with their surroundings. Probably the most surprising thing about crayfish is in how many places they live. As I mentioned earlier, they are often found in creeks and lakes, but they can be found in many other unusual places. For instance, some crayfish live their entire lives in terrestrial burrows. These crayfish, which we call burrowing crayfish, still need access to water, but instead of living in open water, they use their burrows like wells to access groundwater. These burrows can go as deep as 10 feet underground. You'll often find crayfish burrows on riverbanks, but they can also be in unexpected places like roadside ditches, pitcher plant bogs, and on mountainsides near springs. There are also many species of crayfish that live in caves where no light can enter, like Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. As a result of living in pitch-black caves for millennia, cave crayfish usually lose their eyes and become a ghostly white color. One of the coolest things about these adaptations to cave life is that they have happened in a similar fashion to crayfish in caves across the country and also to other animals like fish and amphibians. These are just a few examples of the remarkable diversity of adaptations found in crayfish. If this has piqued your curiosity, the next thing to do is to get outside and catch a crayfish. The best way to catch crayfish depends on what you are specifically looking for. Aquatic crayfish in streams and lakes are the easiest to catch. You can often catch these with your bare hands by carefully flipping rocks or debris if you are fast enough. But be careful, as crayfish will not hesitate to use their claws to defend themselves, and bigger individuals can pack quite a punch. If you're concerned about getting pinched or need a bit of help, you can also use a dip net or even a minnow trap. Just make sure that you check your local regulations, as you may need a permit to catch certain species. This is especially the case for cave crayfish, most of which are protected and should be left alone. The hardest crayfish to catch are burrowing crayfish. There are as many techniques for catching burrowing crayfish as there are crayfish researchers, some of which work more than others. Most of these techniques involve enlarging the opening of the crayfish burrow so that one can stick their hands in there. Crayfish can sometimes be coaxed to come to the surface by pumping the water in the burrow for a few minutes, but this does not always work. It's definitely a good idea to take precautions before trying to dig up a burrowing crayfish, as other animals such as snakes and spiders can live in crayfish burrows, and it's not rare to encounter glass or rusty metal, particularly in roadside ditches. Often, the best way to catch burrowing crayfish is to look for them at night, as they often leave their burrows to look for food, or to wait for a big rainstorm to flush them out of their burrows. The aim of my work is to discover and describe new crayfish species. Believe it or not, each year at least a couple of new crayfish species are discovered in the United States. That means that you could literally discover a new crayfish species in your backyard. I'll leave off today by showing one of the most recent crayfish species which I described, along with my colleagues Dr. Zach Loafman of West Liberty University and Dr. Bronwyn Williams of the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. This species, which we call the jewel mudbug, is a burrowing crayfish found throughout the southeastern United States. As is often the case with new species, this crayfish had been seen before, but no one had studied it closely enough to realize that this was a new species. We collected this species from several states, including Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi, and collected a bunch of data which we used to show that it was indeed a new species. Here is a live jewel mudbug that I collected on one of these trips. This specimen is still young and may grow to be as big as my hand. As you can see, it is already very colorful, but will become even more colorful as it ages. One last neat fact about this species, we gave it the scientific name Lacunicimberis dahliae, a name that honors Dr. Meg Daly, who is the director of the Ohio State University Museum of Biological Diversity.
So Mael told us about some animals that are pretty easy to see in the waterways of Ohio. Let's check in with Marc to learn more about the fish that have disappeared from the Scioto River.
Hi, I'm Marc Kibbey, the curator of the Fish Division at the Museum of Biological Diversity. I oversee the maintenance of 120,000 lots of fish that represent over 1,000 species. But one of my favorite fish is the Scioto madtom, scientific name Noturus troutmani. Milton Troutman, yes, Troutman, a man that devoted most of his life from the time he was a boy to studying and recording all the fishes of Ohio, was the first to discover the Scioto madtom. He first found them in a riffle or stretch of stones over which water flows, creating turbulence and higher levels of oxygen in Big Darby Creek, upstream from State Route 104, not far from Circleville, Ohio. Having become eminently familiar with all fish species in Ohio, Milton realized this was an entirely different madtom species. A madtom is a small, nocturnal, and hard-to-find species of catfish. The mad part of the name is thought to refer to the venom they make. The madtom's needle-like spine supports the pectoral fin, and when it stabs you, it hurts like a bee sting, while the tom part of the name may refer to a tomcat. Over a period of 14 years from 1943 to 1957, from a stretch of Big Darby Creek about 800 feet long that included 4 well-developed riffles at the time, Milton would only find a total of 18 Scioto madtoms. Of those 18 specimens vouchered from this tiny population, 11 are here at OSU, 6 were donated from one of our vouchers to the U.S. National Museum, and the holotype is at the University of Michigan Museum of Zoology. A holotype is the specimen chosen to best represent the concept of the species being described. The Scioto madtom is thought to be descended from the elegant madtom, another small madtom species today found only in North Middle Tennessee and South Middle Kentucky in the Green River drainage that flows north into the Ohio River. One train of thought is that the elegant madtom was previously more widely distributed before the last ice age, and a small population of their ancestors evolved into the Scioto madtom. Now, Scioto madtoms had a slender body that was gray to dusky olive brown above and had 4 dark saddles over the top of the body. An adult may have maxed out at about 2.5 inches long. The elegant madtom has a slender body that is yellow-gray to brown above and has 3 to 4 dark saddles. Their maximum length is about 3 inches long. Following the exciting find, Milton went back to the site often, several times each year. And indeed, many aficionados, that's people really into fish, have done the same. In fact, those aficionados included the Ohio Division of Wildlife, the Ohio EPA Surface Water Crews, and even ichthyologists, the proper scientific term for fish experts, from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers funded a very expensive 3-year-long project to search extensively up and down the lengths of the Muskingum, Scioto, Little Miami, and Great Miami rivers, wherever habitat existed similar to that where the Scioto madtom had been found. But Big Darby Creek is known to be flashy in terms of its flow. That is, the stream receives a lot of water from a large floodplain, rises quickly, and flows forcefully. This results in movement of the cobbles and larger rocks that create the riffles. In the mid-1990s, when I first began sampling Big Darby with former OSU curator Ted Cavender and others, there was a large riffle that stretched from about 50 feet upstream of the Route 104 bridge to approximately 200 feet below the bridge. I watched that riffle move downstream over the years until it has disappeared from sight while standing on the bridge, with most of the stones ending up at a point about 600 feet downstream of the bridge to and around the bend in the stream. Big Darby's flashiness may have disrupted the habitat for the Southern mad tom, making survival difficult for a species with an already severely limited distribution. Also, pollution from farm field tillage and unregulated septic systems was widespread and probably contributed to the demise of the Scioto mad tom, to the point where competition with the other three mad tom species that were common then and now combined with the other factors to drive the small population to extinction. Years later, beginning in the 1970s when several Clean Water Acts were passed, water pollution diminished greatly. Then the implementation of no-till farming meant that the highly harmful silt loads that smothered the stream bottom were likewise reduced significantly. And in 1994, Big Darby Creek was designated a National Scenic River, providing more help for protecting that waterway. But alas, too late for the little Scioto mad tom, which was officially declared extinct just a few years ago. Until next time, I hope you enjoy our wild America.
Thanks for joining us. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also subscribe to make sure you don't miss a single episode of Spectacular Specimens. Tune in next week to learn about prehistoric mammals, as well as mammals that you can find right now today in a metro park in our next exciting episode, Many Mammals.